Well, in this program, all these conditions might sound pretty wild to you. Like, why would somebody treat Parkinson's disease the same way that they treat diabetes? And why, if I don't have any issues at all, but I'm just looking to drop 50 pounds, why would I do the same diet as somebody with diabetes? Well, all these conditions have one thing in common. They have insulin in common. Now, insulin is a hormone produced by our pancreas. Our pancreas is an organ, but it's also a gland that secretes insulin. Insulin is arguably the most important hormone the body produces. You could create a good argument that it's probably one of the most important hormones that our body actually produces. One of its main roles is to help facilitate the movement of glucose from the blood into the cells to be burned as energy to provide our bodies with fuel. So glucose is a sugar molecule. We all know we check our blood glucose levels when we go to our doctor and we do our annual physical. They check our blood glucose levels. So glucose molecules are a type of carbohydrate. So carbohydrates are structures of different sugar molecules, or a combination of different kinds of sugar molecules. So if you think of a carbohydrate as a house, the individual bricks of that house are the sugar molecules. So the one we check in our blood, we check our glucose molecule. So that's one kind of brick, is glucose. And fructose is, maybe that's a stone that you would have for a house. And then you have something like lactose, which could be like wood paneling, but they're all building blocks that make up these carbohydrate structures. Now, glucose in particular, its only job is to fuel the body. Glucose is just a fuel source. It has no other magical benefits in the body other than to fuel the body and make sure that the body is being fueled properly. So it's to provide you with energy, just like gasoline that you get at the gasoline station. It's to fuel your car or maybe your lawnmower or your snow plow. If you're in the Toronto area, chances are you have a snow plow. But that is the purpose of the gasoline. So the gasoline is a fluid. But you wouldn't bathe in it. You wouldn't use it to wash dishes. You wouldn't drink it if you were thirsty. The purpose of the gasoline is fuel for your motors in your life, your car, your snow plow, your ATV, your snowmobile, those sorts of things. It is fuel. So glucose's only purpose in the body is to fuel your cells. Your cells are your little motors. And glucose's job is to fuel those cells. And in order for the glucose to get from the bloodstream into the cell, it must be driven there by insulin. So insulin is a vehicle that carries the glucose and tells it, lets it go into the cell, brings it to the cell to be used as to be used as fuel and fuel the body and give those cells the energy that they need to function properly. So in the conditions that we treat, and we're going to talk about how this manifests next, we have way too much insulin in our bodies. This excess insulin, what happens to our bodies is that we consume fuel way too much. We consume way too much fuel throughout our day, that we end up with a whole lot of fuel sitting around in our bloodstream. So insulin goes around and collects that excess fuel, that excess glucose, and it stores it to be used later on. But we don't use it later on. We let it sit there and we just eat more fuel and we eat more fuel and we eat more fuel. So we're always eating all of the time, and insulin just sits there and it collects all the sugar and it stores it to be used later on. And over time, we end up with all of these canisters of sugar in these insulin canisters in our body, and that poisons us. The sugar makes us sick. The high levels of insulin make us sick that are there used to store the glucose. So how this manifests is we're told to eat 6 times throughout the day. In the late 70s, we transitioned into a very low-fat diet. If a food is very naturally low in fat, it is automatically high in carbohydrates in almost all circumstances. If a food is very low in carbohydrates, it's very naturally high in fat in most circumstances. So take pork belly, for example. Pork belly is the kind of meat that we get bacon from. So pork belly is very high in fat, but it has no sugar in it. Or think of a steak. A steak can be high. I had prime rib last night. Prime rib can be very high in fat, but it has no sugar in it. Or if you think of something like a banana has no fat in it, but it is very high in sugar. So if a food is naturally high in sugar, it's low in fat, and vice versa. So sugar is used to fuel the body. Carbohydrates are primarily used to fuel the body. And so when we consume carbohydrates, it's like we're going to a gas station. So think about the number of times you eat throughout the day. We're told we must eat first thing in the morning because breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And later on, we're going to debunk that myth. But we're told to eat first thing in the morning. And then you go into the office and you have your sort of your muffin in the office first thing in the morning or at your coffee break in the morning. Then we eat lunch, and then we have a coffee break or a snack in the afternoon. And some people just graze and eat at their desk all day long. Then we come home from work and we eat again, and then we make dinner, and then we sit on the couch and we're watching television, or we're sitting at the computer surfing the net, and we tend to snack again. We're constantly filling our body up with fuel all day long. But if you heard me say sitting a lot, we're not actively running marathons or Ironman races throughout the day. I wake up, I get ready for my day. We work out a little bit in the morning, and then I go and I sit in my car. And then I go into my office and I sit at my desk and I check my emails. And then I go and I sit in a clinic with patients, or I sit at my desk and I talk to patients online. And then, it's lunchtime and everybody's sitting. And then I come home from work and we sit, and we're sitting in the car on the way home from work. And when the weather's cold outside and we're lying down watching television or lying down reading in the evening time, we're sitting all of the time. We're not driving our bodies very far. So say the government told you that you must buy 50 liters of gasoline a day, but you're only driving a couple of kilometers a day. You're going to end up not emptying out your fuel tank of your vehicle. So my car on 50 liters of fuel gets about 1,000 kilometers. So I have to drive 1,000 kilometers to empty my fuel tank. So if the government told me that I had to buy 50 liters of gasoline every day, but every day I'm only driving 10 kilometers, I'm going to end up with all of these stored jerry cans of fuel. I'm going to end up filling up my trunk of my vehicle with them, the garage in my home with them, my storage with these canisters of fuel, my backyard with these canisters of fuel. And eventually all my property is going to become this big fire hazard, and I'm going to have all this extra fuel. This is what happens to us. This is how we gain the weight, and this is how the weight that we gain can poison us. And the insulin can poison us and cause these toxic conditions like diabetes and fatty liver and polycystic ovarian syndrome. And this is how it can poison us over time. We eat and we sit, and then we eat some more and we sit. It's like we consume 50 liters of fuel, and then we drive 1 kilometer, and then we consume another 50 liters of fuel, and we drive 1 kilometer, and then we consume another 50 liters of fuel. And at the end of the day, you have liters and liters and liters of excess fuel, and your insulin is staying in your blood, and it's staying there to help collect all of the sugar and store it to be used later on. But at the end of a 5 or a 10 or 15 or 20-year period, our bodies become full of these canisters of excess fuel, and that makes us sick, and that makes us overweight, and that causes all of these conditions. The insulin, the high levels of insulin canisters holding in all this fuel in our body poisons us over time, and the sugar damages our cells and damages our organs over time because we are not using this fuel up. And that is how we get all of these illnesses. So our focus in the intensive dietary management program is to lower your insulin levels through some dietary modifications. So the first strategy that we use is intermittent fasting. And the reason why we use intermittent fasting is if you abstain from going to the gas station to fill up your vehicle, then you'll just use the gasoline that's in your trunk and to fuel your vehicle. And the more often you abstain from going to the gas station to fill up your vehicle, and you use the fuel from your trunk to fuel your vehicle, eventually your trunk's going to be out of fuel. And your body won't be full of fuel. And if your house is full of all these canisters, well, you're going to and then empty out your house the more that you abstain from going to the gas station. Now, sometimes maybe you have to go to the gas station from time to time to get fuel, but the more you abstain from going, the more you'll be able to utilize all the stored fuel that you have, and then you can recycle those jerry cans and eliminate them. So when you fast and you abstain from eating the fuel, you're forcing your body to use that stored fuel that it has. And I'm sure most of you know from rubbing your belly, you got some stored fuel in there. And when you burn that stored fuel, the canister that it's in, the insulin, it goes away. And that's how you lose weight when you fast. And that's how you reduce your insulin levels when you fast. You force your body to use the fuel that's stored in your belly and stored in your organs like your liver and your pancreas. You force your body to use that fuel and empty that fuel from your body and get rid of those canisters, so you're reducing your insulin levels. So that is one way that we reduce our insulin levels, is through the intermittent fasting. A lot of diabetic patients come in, and I know that a lot of you guys are really great at checking your sugars as you're told with your doctors, but you might not pay attention to trends with them so much. But a lot of the patients come in and they'll say, but Megan, my blood sugars are just as high on my eating days as they are on my fasting days. Why is that? How can that be? If I'm not eating on my fasting days, how can my blood sugar levels be as high as they are on my eating days? Well, you still have to be active on your fasting days. Your body still requires fuel, and you've got tons of stored fuel in your body. So your body is just taking that fuel out of its stored canisters and is using it to fuel your body. Alternatively, you can think of your body as a refrigerator. And over time, that extra cake that you ate on your 30th birthday, that extra half a pizza that you had in 1991, that third donut you had that one really bad day in 2007, all of those leftovers that your body didn't use that energy to fuel from, all of those leftovers from those food end up in your internal refrigerator. So a patient comes in and they say, but Megan, I didn't eat and my blood sugar level, well, my blood sugar level was like 8, which is around 145 for our American friends. And they'll say, but my blood sugar was around 8 or 145. How is that? And I said, well, Joe, you've got lots of stored donuts, inside of you, and because you had too many Timbits over your lifetime. Cheesy Canadian joke there, guys. Or you had that extra pizza or that extra birthday cake or that time where you ate like half the loaf of bread all to yourself. Oh, you're burning on that fuel. So when you fast, you're emptying your internal refrigerator. So this is, I literally, when I close my mind and I think of my body, I think of myself as a little refrigerator with head and arms and legs, and I have this really bizarre mental image of myself. But people will ask me, how were you able to maintain your weight loss, or how are you able to maintain your weight loss? To be able to lose 60 pounds, maintain that, and lose another 20 pounds incidentally on top of that, and to maintain a weight loss for five years now, people ask me all the time, how do I do that? Well, I gauge my diet. If I go out and I eat a little bit more than I usually eat, and I know I'm taking some leftovers home in my belly, then I try to skip a meal the next day. And so last night is a good example of this. Last night I went to dinner and the theater with my husband and another couple, and we went out to a restaurant, and their special of the evening was prime rib and seasonal vegetables, and well, I was all over that. I'll never turn down a prime rib. And it was a 10-ounce prime rib. And keep in mind, I'm 5'1". I'm very, very tiny. So 10-ounce prime rib is a whole lot. And I ate about 3/4 of it. And I ate beyond the point of feeling full because it was so tasty. And I would usually at a meal eat 1/3 to half of that. So I pretty much ate the whole damn thing. And on top of that, we had appetizers. They brought us chicharrones. We were at a Mexican restaurant, so it was great. So we had chicharrones, which are pork rinds or pork cracklings. We had guacamole, and we ate quite a lot more than I would usually eat. I got a second side of seasonal vegetables because dinner was dragging on for so long, and I ate a lot. So, and my husband also ate a lot. And this morning we woke up and we were both feeling really stuffed. And my husband said, well, he said, I'm going to fast today because, we ate a lot last night and I'm feeling full, and so that is how we gauge it. So if we feel like we overdid it a little bit, if we're physically feeling a little bit slow and sluggish, then we skip a meal to compensate. So when I look at my body and my mental image of my little fridge with my head and my arms and my legs, I see in it like half of a prime rib and an order of seasonal vegetables and a little bit of guacamole. So I've got a whole other dinner in there or a whole other lunch in there in my internal refrigerator. So I'm going to skip a meal to help offset that meal. Sometimes there are weeks that I don't really fast at all because I don't feel like I've overeaten in any capacity. And my internal refrigerator is empty. But for times that I overdo it, if I go on vacation and we go on vacation with family, and we were recently in Texas for a funeral, and it was a sort of an unfortunate sort of circumstances for a family reunion. My husband's family, they're all U.S. military and Air Force. They're all over the nation. And all over the world. And so everybody came together. So it ended up being an unfortunate reunion, but there was lots of going out and eating, and we were celebrating his grandfather's incredible life. And as human beings, we socialize around food. So when we got home from Texas, my husband said, gosh, we ate a lot. We ate a lot that week. So we fasted the week after to compensate for the overeating on the weekend, and that's just how we do it. We find a balance there. If we don't feel like we've overeaten, if it's a period of time where we're eating at home a lot, chances are that never happens, and we don't really need to fast. I usually do a 24-hour fast once a week for a regular sort of cleanse. Just like once a week, I clean out my refrigerator in my house. Like right before like the garbage day kind of comes around, I'll go through and I'll pull out, what doesn't need to be there. Or usually at the end of the week, right before we did this morning, my husband and I worked out, and then I went to our refrigerator at the end of the week. And we're doing grocery shopping and whatnot tomorrow, and I cleaned out my refrigerator for things that we're not going to go eat or things, that might have expired since last Friday when I last cleaned out my refrigerator. But you clean out your refrigerator once a week. So once a week, I do a 24-hour fast always just to help make sure my internal refrigerator is spotless. And that's how we maintain, and that's how we'll talk a little bit more about maintenance in a little bit. How we also combat the insulin resistance is through the diet. Now, if we have a condition where our body's full of carbohydrates and full of insulin, we don't want to add any more insulin or carbohydrates to the body, or we want to limit the amount of insulin and carbohydrates that we're adding to the body a great deal. Now, there are starchy carbohydrates and sugar, and there are non-starchy carbohydrates. So I'm not referring to the non-starchy carbohydrates here. And I'll go through what those non-starchy and starchy ones are in the food section. But for the carbohydrates, so again, carbohydrates are structures of sugar molecules. So in the gut, they get broken down into their individual bricks, individual sugar molecules. And in order for the sugar to get into the cell, insulin needs to drive it into the cell. So when you eat carbohydrates, all carbohydrates are sugar. All they are fuel. So they all require insulin to be driven into the cell. So when you eat carbohydrates, you produce a lot of insulin. When you eat protein, protein is a building block. Protein is a building structure in the body. So when you eat protein, your body says a couple of things. Are we building anything today? So this morning I worked out, so hopefully I'm building something in my protein from that's sitting in my internal refrigerator from that excess prime rib can't go to work this morning. But your body says, are we building anything? So your body will take a little bit of that protein and it will say, okay, if Megan ate 40 grams of protein, are we building anything? Okay, we'll take 10 grams of that 40 grams of protein and we'll put it towards, building muscle, because Megan's working out every day now at 5 a.m. building muscle. So we'll give 10 milligrams of that, 10 grams of that protein can go to building muscle. And then your body says, does anything need to be repaired? Well, Megan's working out a little bit, and there's cellular breakdown every day. So maybe we'll take 15 grams of that protein to be used for cell repair that day. So that's only 25 grams of protein if I've eaten 40 grams of protein in that meal. So if my body doesn't need the rest of the protein for growth or for repair, having that excess 15 grams of protein in my body can be very dangerous for my body. It can cause high uric acid levels that can lead to gout. It can damage the kidneys. And then once the kidneys are damaged, it doesn't control your blood pressure properly. Then you end up with high blood pressure and kidney disease. So having too much protein in the body, if your body doesn't need it, can be very damaging. So your body does this trick where it can eliminate the excess protein that it doesn't need by converting it into fuel, converting it into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. So if I consume 40 grams of protein in one meal, but my body only needs 25 or 30 grams of that protein for cell growth and repair, then my body will take that extra 10 or 15 grams of protein and through gluconeogenesis will convert it to glucose, which will require the pancreas to secrete some insulin to drive that glucose into the cells. So in our diet, we recommend a moderate protein diet. You can't survive without protein. You absolutely cannot survive without protein because because we need proteins for repair and muscle growth. And so we need this protein for repair and muscle growth. So we need some protein. But if we overeat protein, that excess protein gets converted into sugar, which causes insulin to be released, and then that insulin to drive into our cells for fuel. But if the cells do not require it for fuel, then that excess protein is just that excess protein that's been converted to sugar is just going to get stored as fat. So we need to be careful with the amount of protein that we are consuming on a daily basis, because too much protein can inhibit weight loss. Too much protein can actually cause weight gain. The only people that really seem to understand this are people who have done Atkins and have gained weight on Atkins. Dr. Atkins himself was so misunderstood at the time. The Atkins diet became very popular about 16, 17 years ago. I remember my father following it. If you read Dr. Atkins and you read anything he's ever written and you think about it from an objective perspective, he is asking patients to follow a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carbohydrate diet. But the biggest dietary villain on the planet till about 2016 was dietary fat. And people blocked out that whole fat component. So they cut out their carbohydrates, they cut back on their carbohydrates, they were losing weight because they were scaling back on their carbohydrates. They weren't adding more insulin to their body. They were forcing their body to use their stored sugar, but they started eating more and more and more protein to help satiate themselves. And people are going crazy eating protein. And I remember my father gaining weight on Atkins and freaking out. But I remember watching him eat half a damn chicken every night. And half a chicken is like 150 grams of protein, on top of all other protein sources. So he would just go to town on this protein, and he would start gaining weight. And this is where a lot of the people hit a wall with Dr. Atkins, the Atkins diet, and they started to gain weight in some cases. I don't know if many of you have experienced this, but we have a lot of patients who have experienced it as well. But that was not the Atkins intention. That was not Dr. Atkins' intention for patients to go high protein. Type 1 diabetics, they know when they consume too much protein, they have to take extra insulin. And we teach type 1 diabetics this from the time that they're children. If you eat that extra hamburger, you got to take more insulin. If you eat that extra part of your steak, you're going to have to take more insulin. If you eat, half a chicken instead of a quarter chicken, you need to take more insulin. And we teach this to them very young because we know that if their body doesn't need that protein, it gets converted to glucose and it's going to raise their blood sugar levels. So the type 1 diabetics need to account for excess protein in their diet by taking more insulin. So we know this, and this is a good argument to use against anybody when you talk to them about protein. Protein is not miracle grow for the body. You can't drink a lot of protein shakes. You can't eat a ton of protein and expect to grow into the Arnold Schwarzenegger overnight. Or at least the Terminator-aged Arnold. I haven't seen him too much lately. But you can't just eat protein and expect to grow muscle. You really have to work your muscles hard. And if you work your muscles hard, then they'll require protein to grow. But if you're not using your muscle, you're going to lose it, number one, regardless of how much protein you're eating. If you don't use it, you lose it with muscle. Now, someone just asked a really good question. Michael asked a really good question about how do we know how much protein is good for you. Now, there's a whole bunch of wacky calculations out there, and nobody seems to agree on it. Dr. Fung believes patients should take about 0.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass. So a kilogram is 1.204 pounds. So a kilogram, that would be, and do some quick math here, that's a very, very, very small amount of protein. So Dr. Fung and Dr. Ron Rosedale, they're very much on the lower side of the protein spectrum. But if you're a patient at Dr. Fung and you're a patient in our office, if we know you're working out every day, you're doing weight training, you have a really high intensity job, we know that you do need to take more protein. So some people will usually encourage them to take 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body mass. Because our patients are doing so much fasting, though, we don't really encourage them to track too much in terms of counting carbohydrates or protein grams of protein. Most people are pretty okay staying in between 40 and 70 grams of protein a day. I'm on the smaller end of the scale. I'm 5'1", so I'm tiny. I don't even know if I'm fully 5'1". I might be 5'1.5", but I'm going to give myself that extra half an inch. And I eat around 40 to 50 grams of protein a day. If I'm working out, if I do a really killer workout, I might eat about 55 grams of protein a day. And my husband on the flip side, who's 6'5", he eats closer to the 70 grams of protein a day range. To really know how much protein you should be eating, you would need to know your body composition and know how much lean mass you have to support. So you can find out your body composition by having something called a DEXA scan done, DEXA or just DXA body composition test. So it is a very quick test. There's very minimal risk. You lie there, they scan something over you. If you're claustrophobic, it's perfectly okay. It's sort of this bar that just goes over you. You're not in a tube, and it takes a grand total of 90 seconds to do. And they usually run anywhere from $50 to about $120. And in Toronto, I pay $125 for mine. In Canadian dollars. But my husband's American, and he lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he Palo Alto area. He lived there until about 3 months ago, and he was paying about $50 for him in the Palo Alto area. So that they're pretty inexpensive, and I do think it's worthwhile going just to sort of see your body composition. But that's sort of the gold standard. The true gold standard is an MRI, but nobody is going to order an MRI for you to determine your body composition unless you're in some sort of research study. But a DEXA scan is something that you can go and request yourself. There are body composition scales, and some of them are better than others. I have an Omron one, and I've had it for a couple of years, and it's pretty good compared to my DEXA scans. The results are very similar. So I'm very pleased with its accuracy with my Omron scan, but it's the only one I've ever personally used. It is highly rated. There's a lot of good research data on how accurate it is. And it was actually given to me by a colleague a few years ago, and it works very well. So you can use those scales just to help. Now, we know a lot of people don't want to count anything or track anything. So we usually tell people that for your protein per meal, if you eat a piece of protein that is the size of the palm of your hand and the thickness of the palm of your hand per meal, then that's usually a good measure of how much protein your body needs without having to worry about weighing any meat or finding out what your lean body mass is or doing any sort of calculations. Now, you do have to keep in mind consuming things like nuts, like cheese, so dairy, those extra protein eggs, they're all extra protein that you would have. So you do have to keep in mind if you're having some eggs with your meal, maybe scale back the amount of protein you would be taking by half a palm of your hand. A little bit. Or if you're having a lot of cheese at that meal, you would scale it back by, a third or a quarter or half of the palm of your hand. But we're not too concerned about you checking it obsessively, particularly if you're doing a lot of fasting. I'm more than happy to help all of you guys figure out your macro breakdowns in our follow-up appointments. There are people on the call today that when we talked in consultation, you said to me, I've got families at home, they eat like garbage. I'm going to do my best to eat less garbage, but I'm not interested in doing a very low carbohydrate diet or an extremely low carbohydrate diet called a ketogenic diet. And there are some patients who say, yeah, we want to track everything. We're engineers, we're scientists like me. You guys love data, and you want to track everything. So I will work with you individually on your diet, helping you to achieve your goals. So if you do have a DEXA scan, we'll review it. We'll talk about just how much protein to be eating and weighing protein and counting protein for your specific individual. Everybody's protein requirement is different. Mine, when it comes to a piece of prime rib, well, mine's about 3 to 4 ounces per meal. For someone like my husband, his protein requirement would be the full 10 ounces because he has a lot more lean mass than I do. So these are things that we will all work on more so individually. If you don't care about the nitty-gritty of all of this, that's fine. You are doing a lot of fasting, but keep in mind if the numbers aren't going in the direction, and we might be eating too much protein, and we might have to scale back a little bit on the protein there. Jeannie asked a really great question. Can you eat all of your protein in one meal? You really shouldn't. So if you are somebody who's tracking your protein, you should try to break it between 2 meals. If you do eat it all in one meal, it's not the end of the world. But if you eat it all at one meal at nighttime, your morning sugars will probably be a little bit higher because your body, that's a hefty load of protein to be eating at once. So I myself, I do count my macronutrients. I do follow a strict ketogenic diet. I eat lunch and dinner or brunch and dinner on the days that I do eat. And I divide everything up. So I take 30 grams of protein, I take 30 grams of carbs a day total, but I divide 15 in the morning and 15 at dinner. If I take 50 grams of protein a day, I try to have 25 in the morning and 25 at dinner. Sometimes it might be an extra 5 at dinner. That's okay. But I try to have it balance out. I myself take about 110 to 120 grams of fat a day, and I try to break that between 2 meals. But these are all things, macro breakdown, that we will definitely work one-on-one if you want to track your macros. And we'll talk about how much you can eat in just one meal when we talk about the 24-hour fast in the next section. The third macronutrient, so the 3 macronutrients, we've already talked about the first 2 is carbohydrates and protein. The third one is fat. Fat also has many uses in the body. Fat contains a lot of cholesterol. And believe it or not, almost every cell in the body, the majority of the cells in the body, the base of those cells are cholesterol molecules. Cholesterols are the base of almost every cell in your body. And you lose millions and millions of cells a day. Your body needs to have millions and millions of cholesterol molecules to make new cells, to replenish those that have died. People don't realize how vital cholesterol is. It is one of the most vital things, if not, it's definitely up there on the vital list in the body. But cholesterol is so vital. If we don't have enough of it, it's so important that if we don't get enough cholesterol from our diet, that our liver will produce cholesterol to compensate for what our diets lack, because our body needs so much cholesterol on a daily basis to replace all of those cells. Everybody, when you build a house, you pour the foundation for the house. Cholesterol is a foundation for almost every cell in the body, and you can't build the cell without cholesterol. So our liver actually produces a tremendous amount of cholesterol. It produces about 70 to 80% of the cholesterol in our body alone. And if we're not eating cholesterol, our liver has to work that much harder to produce more cholesterol to make it the base of every cell, almost every cell in the body. That's how important this cholesterol stuff is. So fat is a building block in that sense. It's definitely a building block in that sense. And fat can also be used to fuel the body. But the kind of fat that fuel that fat produces doesn't require insulin. Now, there's a small component of each fatty acid molecule, the glycerol backbone, or of each fat molecule, the glycerol backbone that holds all the fatty acid chains to it. That part can actually be taken and broken down into glucose in the liver through gluconeogenesis. And all those fatty acid chains, they can be used to fuel the body. They get converted to something called ketones, which are an alternative fuel source to glucose. So what's neat about these fatty acids is that they can get converted to ketones, which can be used as fuel too, but they require 0 insulin. So they require no insulin at all. So here you have a great fuel source that doesn't require any insulin. Now, of course, when that glycerol backbone gets broken down in the liver, when we're digesting fat or when we're eating fat, of course, that's going to produce a little bit of glucose and require a little bit of insulin, but that glycerol backbone doesn't produce too much glucose, so it doesn't really require that much insulin. So when you eat something that's very fatty, you're not producing any insulin. So you're not going to get any stored glucose, any stored fat, which is really, really awesome. You're producing trace insulin from that little bit of glucose that you're producing. When you eat protein, if you overeat it, you have the potential to produce a little bit to a lot of glucose and produce a little bit to a lot of protein, a little bit to a lot of insulin. And when you eat carbohydrates, all you're doing is producing insulin. That's all you're doing. So if we have a condition in our body that has way too much insulin and we're storing all this sugar, We don't want to add more sugar and more insulin to the body. So this is why we ask you to follow a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carbohydrate diet, because we want you to add as the least amount of insulin back into the body. Now, on your fasting days, you're dumping stored sugar, you're emptying your liver of stored sugar, you're dumping insulin. So we don't want you to offset that by eating a really high carbohydrate meal on your eating days. And if you are going to be someone that is going to eat a high carbohydrate meal, then we got to fast even longer to make sure that you're dumping out more on your fasting days than you're putting back in on your eating days. So you're always hitting in the negatives there. So we've got to be careful about that if you are going to consume a higher carbohydrate diet. But we ask our patients to follow a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carbohydrate diet. So that moderate protein part's important. I always joke with my in-office patients, you long-distance patients are all safe from me, but I joke with my in-office patients. I say, never come in and tell me about your high-protein diet. I'll kick you. Mind you, I have 5'5" feet, so my kick is not that threatening. But this is not a high-protein diet for that reason. A lot of people say, but don't you need carbohydrates for survival? No, carbohydrates are not an essential macromolecule. Most of your body is perfectly capable of fueling on ketones, so the fuel source produced from fat. Your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, and a good 80% of your brain actually prefer to fuel on ketones rather than fuel on glucose. Ketones to them are like really high, fancy octane gasoline that's going to make their engine run better, so their body run better, that organ run better. So they would actually prefer the ketones over glucose. Now, there is part of the brain that does require glucose for function. So glucose is vital for survival, but we can get that glucose through that glycerol backbone in the fat. We can get that glucose from protein if we need it, because our body can convert the glycerol backbone from the fat, and it can convert extra protein to glucose through gluconeogenesis. So you don't actually need carbohydrates and glucose for survival. It's not an essential macronutrient. And this isn't Dr. Fung's weird, wacky philosophy on macronutrients. I learned in grade 9 science that carbohydrates were not an essential macronutrient for life. Fats are, protein are, because they're required for building blocks for the body. They're required for repair for the body. And they're both capable of being fuel sources, protein with the glucose and fat with the ketones and the glucose. So carbohydrates actually are not necessary for survival, or absolutely not necessary for survival because of that fact. So this is why we use the intermittent fasting and the diet, the high-fat, moderate protein diet, to help you lower your insulin levels. The fasting is essentially a dumping process. Not glamorizing it too well here, but the fasting is essentially a dumping process. You're dumping those canisters out. And if you've got 30 years worth of stored canisters, you're going to be dumping them out for a while here. You're going to be emptying your body out for a while. But you're dumping. You're dumping that stored sugar, you're getting rid of the jerry can, and by doing that, you're losing weight. So you're dumping the stored sugar, you're eliminating the insulin, you lose weight. You dump the sugar, you reduce the insulin, you lose weight. So that is how the fasting works. It's a dumping process. And the reason why we ask you to do the high-fat, moderate protein, low-carbohydrate diet is so you don't add more sugar, you don't add more insulin to your body on the days that you eat, so that dumping process can be more effective. Are there going to be times where you go and eat birthday cake and have half a pizza and eat those order of French fries? I'm sure there are. I'm absolutely sure that there are going to be those times. We all fall victim from time to time. I've been in ketosis straight now, so I've been in a fat burning state, dietary fat primarily. I'm trying to preserve the body fat that I have. I eat a lot of dietary fat since July 28th, 2016, and today is March 31st. 2017. So I've been in this fat burning state. I'm doing it now more so as a personal challenge, and just to see if all these things about a ketogenic diet are true, all of the energy and all of the mental clarity and all of that. So for me, it's my own personal experiment, and that's why I'm staying in ketosis. But Dr. Fung himself follows a moderate low carbohydrate diet. Sometimes he eats ice cream, and I've seen him. And sometimes we'll have French fries, and I'll see him. But it's not all of the time. It's very rare, and it's definitely inconsistent. So there are times. We all have these times. Sometimes he just wants an ice cream cone. And he'll have that ice cream cone, and that's okay. And in the past, until I decided to do this ketogenic experiment on myself, every now and then if I wanted pizza or pasta, that's okay. So my name is Ramos. That's my married name. My husband is American. His great-grandparents were born in Puerto Rico. My name is Ramos. When you guys see me, if you haven't seen me before, I'm an albino redhead with blonde hair. Actually, despite being a redhead, I'm a blonde. And I'm very pale. But I have an Italian father with dark hair and dark skin. I have an Irish mother with dark hair and dark skin. I don't know where my red hair or my pale skin comes from. You think from the Irish side, but not so much. I know about all these cultural things in the diet. My mother took us to an Italian bakery every morning to get bread when we were children growing up. We would have pasta at least 4 times a week. If it wasn't the main, it was a side to something. My mother, with her background, was so many potatoes, corn, peas, just lots and lots of potatoes. My husband grew up lots of rice and beans and lots of it. Like they would make up the bulk of the plate would be a rice and beans. All cultures have their vices, and I definitely know about these vices. And working in Toronto, we're the most multiculturally diverse city in the entire world. Just over 50% of the population of the city of Toronto have immigrated to Canada. Which, it's so wonderful for our city. It's a really great diverse city. We've got so many great restaurants. It's a terrible city to live in if you want a diet. I live right smack downtown in the middle of all of the good food. But every culture has its quirks. So we do have to make modifications. And there are going to be times where we just want something. As someone who grew up eating pasta for breakfast on Sunday mornings because it was a family tradition her whole life, every now and then I'm going to want pasta, and that should be okay. But we want to make sure the majority of time when we're eating, we're not refilling our bodies back up with sugar and insulin.